The first bullet shattered the window before Sarah's brain could process what her eyes were seeing. She had been watching the black SUV crawl past Rosie's diner for the third time. Something primal in her gut was screaming, "Wrong. Something is wrong." The kind of instinct you develop when you grow up in Southside Chicago, where gunshots are more common than sirens, where survival means learning to read danger before it reads you. The barrel emerged from the passenger window like a serpent's tongue, black, cold, seeking its prey. Sarah didn't think. Thinking requires time, and time was measured in heartbeats, and heartbeats meant death. Get down. Her body moved before the words could escape her throat. The corner booth where Sophia sat doing her calculus homework was exactly 15 feet away. Sarah crossed that distance in 4 strides, her worn sneakers finding grip on the grease-slicked floor, her shoulder dropping like she was making a tackle she had never been strong enough to make anywhere else in her 27 years of barely surviving. She hit the girl like a freight train. The girl, beautiful, untouchable Sophia with her designer backpack and her habit of eating alone despite being pretty enough to sit anywhere, went sprawling backward, her chair clattering as Sarah's body covered hers completely. The world exploded. Tat 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 tat. Glass became razor rain, wood became shrapnel, the smell of gunpowder mixed with fryer grease and pure terror. Sarah felt something hot punch through her shoulder blade, then another burning kiss below her ribs, then a third fire grazing her skull. Her back was on fire. Her lungs couldn't find air, but beneath her, Sophia was screaming, and she was screaming, which meant she was alive, which meant Sarah had done it right. Sarah's vision began to tunnel, darkness creeping in from the edges. The last thing she saw before the black swallowed her whole was Sophia's face, those gray eyes wide with terror and something else, something that looked almost like recognition, her lips forming words Sarah couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. What Sarah couldn't know as consciousness slipped away and her blood pooled on the cracked linoleum was that those words were, "Call my father, call Vincent Nero." What Sarah couldn't know was that Vincent Nero was the most feared man on the East Coast, the boss of the Nero Empire, the king of shadows who made senators tremble and rivals disappear. What Sarah couldn't know was that she had just saved the one person in this city whose life was worth more than money, more than power, more than blood. She had just earned a debt that would be paid in iron and loyalty. And Vincent Nero always paid his debts. If you want to know what satisfying satisfies, Vincent Nero pays. This satisfies blood debt. Smash that like button right now. Share this story with someone who loves mafia romance. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the most powerful man in the underworld meets the woman who saved his daughter. Because in the world of Vincent Nero, debts are paid in full, and love is the most dangerous debt of all. 2 weeks before the bullets changed Sarah Reyes's life forever, she woke at 4 a.m, in the cramped studio apartment on Chicago's South Side, the soft, relentless hiss of her grandmother's oxygen machine filling the air, a sound that had become the room's second heartbeat. Sarah lying on a thin mattress spread across the floor with her eyes fixed on the peeling ceiling where flakes of paint hung like tired ghosts, counting each second before the new day began. Beside her, Lily, her 17-year-old sister, who had been deaf and mute since birth, curled in on herself like a stray kitten, with one hand clutched around the worn old teddy bear their mother had given her before she left them. Sarah, turning her gaze to her grandmother's bed, where Abuela Rosa, a woman of 75 who had once been as strong as stone, was now only skin stretched over bone as terminal lung cancer gnawed away at what little time she had left. Sarah Reyes, having mastered the art of being invisible since the age of 12, the year a fire swallowed their slum house and carried her parents into death, she still remembered the smell of smoke, the screaming, her mother's hands pushing her toward the window before the ceiling collapsed. And from that moment, Sarah learned never to be seen, never to be noticed, never to exist too loudly in the eyes of the world, because this world had no place for poor orphan children. She rose in the darkness and moved with the quiet grace of a cat, so as not to wake Lily, her breakfast a half loaf of stale bread from 2 days before, and a glass of tap water, the rest left for her grandmother and her sister as always, as she had done for 15 years. The medicine cabinet on the wall standing empty because her grandmother's painkillers had run out the week before, and Sarah had been forced to choose between buying new medicine or paying the electricity bill so the oxygen machine could keep running. She chose the electricity, and her grandmother would have to endure the pain a few more days. Sarah pulled on her faded uniform, her sneakers patched with tape at the toes, and stepped out of the apartment at 4:30, walking 40 minutes to her first job because she had no money for the bus. From 5 to 8 in the morning, she cleaned offices in a downtown law firm where the wealthy passed by her as if she were a ghost. They did not look at her, did not greet her, did not know her name. And Sarah liked it that way because being invisible was safe. From 11 until 6 in the evening, she worked as a waitress at Rosie's Diner, a modest place where tips were usually loose coins, and sometimes leering looks from drunken men she had to pretend not to see. From 7 at night until 11, she washed dishes in the kitchen of an Italian restaurant, her hands blistered from hot water and soap, but she was not allowed to complain. Each month, Sarah earned about $2,400. The rent was $800. Electricity and water were $200. Medicine and medical equipment for her grandmother were $600. Tuition at a special school for Lily was $500. Food for the family was $300, and she was always short by at least $500 every month. Debts piled on debts, bills piled on bills, shut-off notices piled on eviction warnings. And Sarah stopped counting when the total passed $100,000. Every night she lay listening to her grandmother's labored breathing and wondering how much longer she could endure. Yet every morning, she still woke, still walked, still worked, because her grandmother needed her, because Lily needed her, because if Sarah fell, there would be no one to hold those two women up. And that was why Sarah Reyes, at the age of 27, had forgotten what it felt like to live. She was only existing, day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, until the mysterious girl appeared. A girl who introduced herself as Sophia Chen appeared at Rosie's Diner on a Monday, exactly 2 weeks before Sarah Reyes's world exploded into fragments. Sarah was wiping down a table when the door opened, and a girl stepped inside, carrying with her the scent of expensive perfume that felt strangely out of place among the smells of grease and burnt coffee at Rosie's. The girl looked about 16, with long, glossy black hair, porcelain white skin, a face so beautiful it could have stepped off a magazine cover. The backpack on her shoulder bore the logo of a luxury brand Sarah had only ever seen in shops she would never dare to enter. The phone in her hand was the newest model, something Sarah would have had to work 3 months without eating to afford. But what caught Sarah's attention was not the obvious wealth the girl wore. It was her eyes, gray like the sky before a storm, deep and strangely sad. Sarah knew that look because she saw it every morning in the mirror. Sophia, as the girl introduced herself when she ordered, chose the table in the back corner of the diner, where it was hidden from the view of the front door. She ordered a Caesar salad and a glass of lemonade and opened a book to read. No headphones, no scrolling on her phone, just sitting there in silence, as if trying to dissolve into the space around her, and Sarah recognized it immediately. This girl was trying to be invisible just like Sarah. The next day, Sophia came back, and the day after that, and the day after that. Every day after school, she appeared at Rosie's, sat at the same corner table, ordered the same meal she barely touched, worked on her calculus homework with the face of someone running from something. Sarah did not ask. Sarah never asked. But she began to notice more. She noticed that no one ever came to pick Sophia up. She noticed that Sophia always watched the window with a wary look, as if waiting for something terrible to happen. She noticed that Sophia, though beautiful enough that any boy might have wanted to approach her, carried an aura that made people keep their distance. A week passed, and then 2. Sarah and Sophia did not talk much, only brief exchanges when Sarah brought the food or cleared the table. But there was an invisible thread between them that only the wounded could feel, 2 lonely people recognizing each other in a crowd. And then the fateful day arrived. Tuesday, the 15th of October. The Chicago sky was gray and heavy as poured lead. Sarah was standing behind the counter when she saw it for the first time. A black SUV with dark-tinted windows crawling slowly past the front of Rosie's Diner at 4:47 in the afternoon. Sarah did not think much of it. She only glanced up and returned to the stack of dirty dishes, but something in her stomach tightened. A vague instinct she had learned from growing up on the South Side. 5 minutes later, the SUV came back, this time slower, almost stopping in front of the window where Sophia was sitting. Sarah set her hand on the counter, her heart beginning to race. She looked at Sophia. The girl was still bent over her work, completely unaware, and the darkness inside Sarah began to scream warnings she had not yet learned how to understand. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. White light pierced through her eyelids like thousands of needles. Sarah tried to open her eyes, but her lids felt as heavy as poured lead, and every smallest movement tore pain through her body. She heard the steady beeping of machines, the faint smell of antiseptic in the air, and the cold, smooth feel of hospital sheets beneath her back. This was not her apartment. This was not the sound of her grandmother's oxygen machine. Sarah forced her eyes open, and the world she saw made her heart seem to stop for a few seconds. The room was larger than the studio apartment the 3 of them lived in. The walls painted a soft cream, sheer white silk curtains moving gently in the air from the conditioner, polished wooden floors reflecting warm yellow light, A large hospital bed with a shining metal frame surrounded by rows of medical equipment Sarah had only ever seen in films about hospitals for the wealthy. A heart monitor, an automatic blood pressure machine. Screens flashing numbers she did not understand. Her left arm was hooked to an intravenous line, a clear tube running to a fluid bag hanging from a bright metal stand. Sarah tried to sit up and pain erupted like a volcano. Her left shoulder burned as if someone were lighting a fire inside it. Her right rib stabbed so sharply she could not draw a deep breath, and her head buzzed as if thousands of bees were nesting inside her skull. She lifted her hand and touched the bandages wrapped around her head, her trembling fingers brushing a wound she did not remember receiving. Memory crashed over her like a waterfall. The black SUV, the gun barrel sliding out of the window, the screaming in her head. Sophia. She had lunged toward Sophia. Then the gunshot. Then darkness. The door opened, and a middle-aged woman in a crisp white nurse's uniform entered with a professional smile on her lips. She said something gently, asking how Sarah felt, but Sarah heard nothing because her mind was spinning around a single question. Where was she, and who was going to pay for all of this? Sarah had no health insurance. Sarah did not even have enough money to buy painkillers for her grandmother. This room, this bed, this equipment, this private nurse, all of it screamed the word expensive. Every second that passed, every drop of fluid flowing into her body, was another enormous number added to the weight on her shoulders. Sarah's heart began to race, and the monitor started to sound an alarm. The nurse hurried over, saying something about calming down and about how she needed to rest. But Sarah could not calm down. She tried to sit up, tugged at the IV line, her mouth stumbling over words that she had to leave. She could not afford this. She had to go home. Her grandmother was waiting. Her sister was waiting. But her body would not obey. Pain slammed her back onto the bed. Cold sweat broke out across her skin. Her breathing grew shallow and fast. Sarah lay there helpless, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, and for the first time in 15 years, she felt pathetically small. She was used to fighting alone, used to carrying everything on her shoulders, used to needing no one's help. But now, lying in a hospital room more luxurious than any place she had ever set foot in, Sarah realized she was in a completely different world, a world she did not belong to. And someone had brought her here. Someone was paying for all of this. The question was who and why, and the answer stepped in with the heavy sound of the door opening, carrying darkness and power like a storm about to fall. The door opened without a sound. Yet Sarah could have sworn the temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. The nurse standing beside her bed suddenly lowered her head and stepped back toward the wall as if trying to shrink her own presence. And then he entered. Sarah had seen many kinds of people in her 27 years on Chicago's South Side. She had seen drug dealers with wild eyes, tattooed thugs, killers with cold smiles. But never in her life had she felt such pure power radiating from a human being as she felt now. The man was at least 6'1", his body like it had been carved from granite, every step solid and deliberate as if the world itself belonged to him. The black three-piece suit fit him perfectly, the kind of fabric Sarah knew must cost as much as a year of her rent, tailored to perfection in every seam and stitch. A black tie, a pristine white shirt, a watch on his wrist catching the hospital light. But it was not the wealth that made Sarah instinctively draw back and press herself deeper into the mattress. It was his face, angular with a jawline sharp as a blade, high cheekbones, a nose like something carved from ancient Roman stone, and the scar, a long scar running from his left temple down to his jawbone, cutting across his cheek as if someone had tried and failed to cleave his face in half. The scar did not make him uglier. It made him look like something stepped out of a nightmare, beautiful in a dangerous and deadly way. But the most terrifying thing was his eyes. Eyes the color of cold steel, like a winter sky before a snowstorm, like a blade that had tasted the blood of hundreds. There was no warmth in them, no emotion, only the cold calculation of a predator measuring its prey. And those eyes were fixed on Sarah. She could not breathe. Her lungs felt crushed by an invisible hand. Every survival instinct she had honed over 27 years was screaming in her head to run, to hide, that this man was danger, that this was death wearing an expensive suit. But she could not run. She could not even move. The man stopped beside her bed less than a meter away. He was taller than she had imagined from a distance. Like a mountain blocking out the light, the faint scent of expensive cologne lingered in the air, mixed with something more primal. The smell of power, of danger, of perfectly controlled violence. Sarah swallowed, her throat dry as a desert. She tried to open her mouth to say something, to ask who he was, why she was here, what had happened to Sophia, but no sound came out. The man tilted his head slightly, his gray gaze sliding over Sarah's body, over the bandage on her head, over her left shoulder held in a brace, over the bruises on her arm, and then returning to her wide brown eyes. And then he spoke, his voice low like distant thunder, like stones rolling into a deep ravine, like a death sentence being read in a courtroom. "You saved my daughter." 5 words. Only 5 words. Yet they changed everything. Sarah blinked, her mind spinning as it tried to process the meaning. Daughter? Sophia, the girl in the diner, the girl Sarah had thrown herself in front of when the bullets came. His daughter, and this man with the scarred face and ice-cold eyes, with the kind of power that made the room itself seem to suffocate, was not an ordinary man. He was what Sarah had only heard whispered about on the south side. Names no one dared speak aloud. Ghosts who controlled the city from the shadows. He was Mafia, and Sarah had just saved his daughter's life. Vincent Nero did not sit down. He stood there like a statue, his gray eyes never leaving Sarah as she tried to find her voice again. The silence stretched as if time itself had stopped, with only the steady beep of the heart monitor as proof that the world was still moving. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice rough as if she had not spoken for centuries. "Sophia, is she all right?" Vincent nodded, a short, decisive movement. "She has not a scratch. Because of you." He said it as if delivering a report, without emotion, without any shift in tone. Yet Sarah could see something flash in his gray eyes, something that looked almost like relief. "Sophia Nero is my only child," Vincent went on, his deep voice filling the quiet room. "Her mother died giving birth to her. For 16 years she has been everything I have, the sole heir to the Nero Empire." The Nero Empire. Sarah had heard that name before, in the whispered stories on the south side, in the warnings of the old about which streets not to walk, which names not to speak. Nero was a darkness that swallowed other darkness. Nero was the law when law no longer existed. Nero was death wearing a businessman's coat, and the man standing before her was the king of that shadowed kingdom. "There are many who want my daughter dead," Vincent continued, his voice cold as ice, "or kidnapped for ransom, or tortured to take revenge on me. The shooting that day was done by a Russian gang. They followed Sophia for 2 weeks, waiting for their moment, and when they acted, you appeared." Sarah remembered that instant, the black gun barrel, the scream of instinct, her body moving before her mind could decide. 3 bullets. She had taken 3 bullets. Vincent seemed to read her thoughts. "One passed through your left shoulder blade and nearly touched the aorta. One is lodged beneath your right ribs 2 centimeters from the liver. One grazed your skull, causing a mild brain injury." He listed them as if reading a grocery list, without the slightest tremor in his voice. "The doctors say you were lucky. I say you risked your life." Sarah did not know how to react. She lay there looking up at the most powerful man on the American East Coast and felt smaller than ever. "The shooters?" she whispered. "Were they caught?" For the first time a smile appeared on Vincent Nero's lips, but it was not warm or joyful. It was the smile of a wolf seeing its prey cornered. "They are in my basement," he said, his voice light as a feather and sharp as a razor. "They have been begging to die for 3 days, but I have not allowed it yet." Sarah shuddered. A chill ran down her spine, not from the pain of her wounds, but from the pure cruelty in his tone. He did not speak of torture as a crime. He spoke of it as a task to be completed, a sentence to be carried out, a blood debt to be paid, and Sarah realized with suffocating clarity that she was lying in a hospital bed paid for by a monster. Vincent watched her reaction, his gray eyes missing nothing. "You are afraid of me," he said. Not a question, but a statement. "Good. You should be, but you do not need to be afraid for yourself." He stepped 1 pace closer, and Sarah had to fight the instinct to retreat. "I owe you, Sarah Reyes," Vincent said, speaking her name for the first time and giving it a strange weight in his voice. "You saved my daughter's life without knowing who she was. You were ready to die for a child who was a stranger to you. That..." He paused, and something in his gray eyes softened just a fraction. "I cannot repay with money, but I will repay, because I always repay my debts." And in Vincent Nero's world that was both a promise and a curse. The hospital room door flew open before Vincent could say anything more, and a figure rushed in like a storm. Sophia, the 16-year-old girl with the same gray eyes as her father, now red from crying, her face pale as paper, her black hair tangled as if she had not brushed it for days. Before Sarah could react, Sophia was already at the bedside, throwing her arms around her and holding on so tightly that Sarah had to clench her teeth to keep from crying out in pain. "She is awake," Sophia sobbed into Sarah's shoulder, her voice breaking. "Father, she is awake. I was so afraid. I was afraid she would never wake up again. Sarah lay there motionless, not knowing what to do with the trembling 16-year-old body in her arms. She had not been held like this since her mother died in the fire 15 years ago. Sarah's hand, weak and shaking, slowly lifted and rested on Sophia's back, patting her awkwardly. "You are all right," Sarah whispered hoarsely. "I am all right." Sophia lifted her head, her gray eyes wet with tears, staring straight into Sarah's with gratitude and guilt, mixed together. "Why did you do that?" the girl asked in a trembling voice. "You did not even know who I was. You did not know how important I was. Why did you jump in front of bullets for a stranger?" Sarah had no answer. Or perhaps she did, but did not know how to shape it into words. She only knew that in that moment, when the gun was pointed at the lonely girl in the corner of the diner, her body had moved before her mind could think, as if some part of her had seen herself in Sophia, two lonely souls in a cruel world. "You know," Sophia went on, still holding Sarah's hand as if afraid she might vanish. "My mother died giving birth to me. I never met her, never heard her voice, never held her. I grew up with my father, with bodyguards, with tutors, but no one." The girl choked. "No one ever looked at me like a normal daughter. They look at me and see an heir, a potential hostage. The weak point of Vincent Nero." Sarah glanced at Vincent. He stood a few steps away, his face still cold as stone, but his gray eyes fixed on his daughter with something Sarah barely recognized. Pain, helplessness, love buried beneath thick ice. "You are the first," Sophia said more steadily now. "The first person besides my father who treated me like a normal human being. I saw the way you looked at me in the diner, not with curiosity or fear, just understanding, as if you knew how I felt." And she had, Sarah thought, she had seen herself in Sophia, a lonely girl trying to become invisible in the world. Vincent stepped closer and placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Sophia looked up at him, then nodded and released Sarah, stepping back to make room for him. "Sarah Reyes," Vincent said, his voice still low and cold, but now with something slightly softer in it. "You saved the most precious thing I have. Anything you want, say it. Anything. Money, a home, a job, protection. Just say it and I will give it to you. Anything." Sarah opened her mouth to refuse. She did not want to owe anyone, least of all a mafia lord. But then images rose in her mind. Abuela Rosa with tired eyes and labored breath. Lily with her innocent smile and ears that would never hear. The crumbling apartment with the eviction notice on the door. The empty medicine cabinet. The piled hospital bills. Lily's tuition. The electricity about to be cut off. $100,000 of debt crushing her life. And Vincent Nero's offer rang in her mind like a bell. Anything. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 15 years, Sarah Reyes allowed herself to hope. 1 week later, Sarah walked out of the hospital with her left arm still in a brace, and bandages still wrapped around her head. She thought she would be taken back to the shabby studio apartment on the south side, where the sound of her grandmother's oxygen machine and the smell of dampness had become part of life. But the black Escalade with the suited driver did not stop in the south side. It kept going past the familiar streets of trash and graffiti, and into a neighborhood Sarah had only ever seen on television. Lincoln Park, houses with green lawns and white fences, expensive cars parked in garages, children playing on the sidewalks without fear of gunshots or discarded needles. The car stopped in front of a luxury apartment building with shining glass doors and a uniformed doorman. Sarah stepped out on trembling legs, not sure where she was or why she was here. 12th floor, apartment 1201. The door opened and Sarah froze, forgetting how to breathe. The apartment was 10 times larger than her old studio. Polished wooden floors, warm cream walls, wide windows overlooking Lake Michigan, sparkling in the afternoon sun. A living room with a soft leather sofa, an open kitchen with a double-door refrigerator and gleaming induction stove. And in the corner by the sun-filled window, Abuela Rosa was sitting in an armchair with a new oxygen machine beside her and a nurse in a white uniform, checking her blood pressure. She looked up when Sarah entered and her old eyes lit up. "Mija," her voice weak but full of happiness. "You are home." Sarah rushed to her and knelt on the floor, taking her spotted, fragile hand, tears running down her face without her bothering to wipe them away. "Grandma," she whispered. "Where are we?" Before she could answer, a figure rushed in from the other room. Lily, her sister with brown hair and a ponytail and wide eyes bright with joy. The 17-year-old threw herself into Sarah's arms, holding her tight as if afraid she would disappear. And then Sarah noticed something different. Lily's ears. She was wearing the newest model of hearing aids, the kind Sarah had researched hundreds of times online, and knew cost as much as a year of her wages. Lily took out her phone. typed quickly and showed it to Sarah. "Sister, I can hear now. Not very clearly, but I can hear. Someone came to install them. They said you arranged it." Sarah had arranged nothing. She did not even know what was happening. She stood and wandered through the apartment like a sleepwalker. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a refrigerator full of food, a medicine cabinet full of what her grandmother needed, and on the dining table a white envelope waiting. Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a stack of papers. Her grandmother's hospital bills paid. 3 months of overdue rent on the old apartment paid. Electricity, water, gas paid. Lily's tuition for the whole year paid. And on the last page, a bank statement. All of Sarah Reyes's debts. $80,000 in medical bills, $20,000 in loans, $15,000 in credit cards, totaling more than $100,000. Paid, balance, 0. At the bottom of the page, a messy black ink signature, VN. Sarah stared at the signature, then at the luxurious apartment, then at her grandmother being cared for, then at Lily smiling with ears that could hear, and she felt the world spin beneath her feet. Vincent Nero had changed her life in 1 week, and Sarah did not know whether she should be grateful or afraid. Sarah stood by the window looking out over Lake Michigan shimmering in the sunset light. Her hand clenched around the black business card with silver lettering she had found in the envelope. Vincent Nero, and a string of numbers. Her chest ached, not from her unhealed wounds but from something far heavier. The feeling of debt, the feeling of being bought, the feeling that her life no longer belonged to her. Sarah had lived 27 years on her own strength. She had clawed and fought and fallen and risen again all by herself. She had never begged anyone, never owed anyone, and now a stranger, a mafia lord with eyes cold as ice, had paid her debts, bought her a new apartment, arranged everything as if she were an object to be repaired. No, Sarah could not accept this. She dialed the number and waited. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then the low voice answered on the other end. "Sarah Reyes." Vincent Nero's voice held no surprise, as if he had known she would call. "I cannot accept these things," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady though her heart was racing. "The apartment, the money, all of it. I do not want to owe you anything." Silence stretched for a few seconds. "You do not owe me?" Vincent replied, his voice cold as steel. "I owe you. This is how I repay. But I did not ask you to repay me. You do not need to ask." Vincent cut in, his voice suddenly sharper. "And you do not have the right to refuse." Sarah felt blood rush to her face. Anger flared in her chest. The anger she had held back for years at an unfair world, at a cruel fate, at people who always thought they could control her life. "I do not have the right to refuse," she repeated, her voice shaking with rage. "Who do you think you are to say that to me? Do you think because you have money and power you can buy me like an object?" "Sarah." Vincent's voice was terrifyingly calm. "No," she shouted, no longer caring who she was speaking to. "Listen to me. I have lived my whole life without anyone's charity. I raised my grandmother and my sister with my bare hands. I am not something you can buy. I am not a puppet you can control. Do you understand?" Silence, a silence so long Sarah thought he had hung up. Then he spoke, and this time his voice was different. No longer cold or threatening, something almost gentle, almost respectful. "Do you know why I did all this?" Vincent asked. "Because I saved your daughter. That is part of it, but not all of it." Vincent paused, and Sarah could hear a soft sigh on the line. "I have lived in this world for 36 years. I have seen all kinds of people. Those who would sell their souls for money, those who would betray family for power, those who would step over corpses without blinking. But you, Sarah Reyes, you did something I have never seen anyone do. You were willing to die for a child you did not know. Not for money, not for fame, not for anything but the pure instinct to protect. That," his voice lowered, "cannot be bought, and that is why I respect you." Sarah stood there with the phone to her ear, not knowing what to say. "I am not asking you to owe me anything," Vincent went on. "I am not asking you to do anything for me. What I have given you, consider it a gift. No strings, no conditions, just my way of saying thank you." The call ended with a steady tone. Sarah stood motionless by the window, her mind spinning, trying to understand what had just happened. "Mija," Abuela Rosa's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned. Her grandmother sat in the armchair, her old eyes looking at her with the understanding only those who have lived most of a lifetime possess. She heard the conversation. She said, her voice weak but full of love, "You do not want to accept help." She understood. "You are like your mother, stubborn and proud. But Mija, sometimes God sends us angels in the strangest forms." "Grandma," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside her, "he is Mafia. He is dangerous. Abuela Rosa took Sierra's hand, her thin fingers warm. He is the man who let Lily hear my voice for the first time in her life. He is the man who gave you the chance to live, instead of only exist. You may hate him, but do not let pride blind you. Sierra looked at her, then back out the window, where the sky was turning red with sunset, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everything in this world has a price. 2 weeks after the call with Vincent, when Sierra's wounds had almost healed, and her new life was beginning to feel ordinary, her phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Sister Sarah, this is Sophia. My father gave me your number. I want to invite you to my house. May I?" Sarah stared at the message for 5 minutes, not knowing how to reply. Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep her distance from Vincent Nero's world, from the darkness and power she did not belong to. But then she remembered Sophia's sad gray eyes, the way the 16-year-old had clung to her in the hospital, the loneliness they shared. And Sarah typed a single word: yes. The black Escalade came to pick her up on Saturday morning. Sarah wore the cream sweater she had bought from her old savings, clean jeans, and the only pair of sneakers she owned without tape on them. She felt like a small fish about to swim into the ocean. The car left Lincoln Park and drove through streets that grew wider and greener into the northern suburbs of Chicago, where the city's wealthiest lived. And then Sarah saw it. The Nero estate was not a house. It was a castle. Tall, gray stone walls, watchtowers at the corners, a massive black iron gate with ornate patterns opening slowly as the car approached, green lawns stretching to the horizon, a white marble fountain at the entrance, dozens of luxury cars in a parking area as wide as a football field. But what made Sarah shiver was not the luxury. It was the men. They were everywhere, at the gate, patrolling the lawn, guarding the main door, all in black suits and sunglasses with something bulging under their jackets that Sarah knew was not a phone. This was a fortress, and these men were its warriors. The car stopped at the main entrance, and the door opened. Sophia stood there with her black hair in a high ponytail, wearing a light floral dress and a bright smile. "Sister Sarah," she cried, running forward to hug her as if they had been apart for a year. "I am so glad. I thought you would not come." Sarah smiled, a real smile for the first time in weeks. "I promised." Sophia took her hand and pulled her inside the estate, and if the outside had overwhelmed Sarah, the inside made her forget how to breathe. The main hall was as vast as an opera stage, with a soaring ceiling and a massive crystal chandelier scattering light, polished white marble floors reflecting her image, a sweeping staircase with wrought iron railings curling up to the second, third, and fourth floors, classical oil paintings on the walls, tall vases of fresh flowers at every corner. Sarah felt like an ant in a palace. She did not belong here. Her old sneakers sounded out of place on the marble in the luxurious silence. Everything here screamed wealth, and Sarah was just an office cleaner, with 3 jobs and $100,000 of debt someone else had paid for her. "Do not worry so much," Sophia said, as if reading Sarah's thoughts. "I used to feel suffocated here too." "Suffocated?" Sarah looked at the 16-year-old, not understanding. Sophia led her up the stairs past long corridors with dozens of closed doors. "Do you see how big this house is?" Sophia asked, her voice suddenly sadder. 18 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, 3 living rooms, 2 pools, 1 tennis court. But you know what? She stopped at a white door and placed her hand on the handle. "I only have my father, and my father is always busy. Meetings, work, things I am not allowed to know about. I grew up with tutors, nannies, bodyguards, but no one to talk to. No one who understood how it felt to have no mother and a father too distant." Sophia opened the door into her bedroom, a room as large as Sarah's entire old apartment on the south side. "You are the first person I have invited here," Sophia said, turning back with shining gray eyes. "The first who is not a guard or a servant, the first I truly want as a friend." And in that moment, in a room suffocating with luxury, Sarah saw herself in Sophia, 2 lonely girls living in different worlds but carrying the same pain, and perhaps that was why fate had brought them together. Sophia led Sarah downstairs through long, echoing corridors to a large room at the back of the estate. "This is where the uncles usually meet," Sophia whispered, as if sharing a state secret. "Father said, today you can meet them, so they know who you are, and no one is allowed to touch you." Before Sarah could ask what touch meant, Sophia had already pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The room looked like a library from an old film, with dark paneled walls, shelves of books rising to the ceiling, a stone fireplace crackling in the corner, and 4 men seated around a massive wooden table. They turned as Sarah entered, and she felt as if she had stepped into a lion's den. The first she noticed was a black man, in his mid-40s with neatly cropped gray hair, and a face as expressionless as carved stone. sitting silently in the corner watching her with eyes sharp as razors missing. "Nothing, Marcus Williams," Sophia whispered. "They call him the Ghost, father's right hand, former special forces. He can kill a man without anyone ever knowing he was there." Sierra swallowed. Marcus kept looking her up and down as if assessing a potential opponent, then gave a tiny, almost invisible nod, and Sophia squeezed Sarah's hand, whispering that he accepted her. The second man stood and walked toward Sarah, about 40 with slicked-back black hair, a white suit standing out among the dark tones, a confident smile on his lips. "So this is the brave girl who saved our little princess," he said in a voice smooth as velvet. "I am Dante Rossi. I handle the Nero family's money." He pulled a glossy black credit card from his pocket and offered it to Sarah. "A gift from the boss. No limit. Buy whatever you want." Sarah looked at the card, then at Dante, and shook her head. "Thank you, but I do not need it." Dante blinked, clearly unused to being refused. A second passed, then another. Then he laughed loudly. "I like this girl," he said, turning toward the corner where a figure stood in shadow. "Boss, she has guts. Not many people refuse Nero money." Sierra followed his gaze, and her heart almost stopped. Vincent Nero stood there, leaning against a bookcase, his gray eyes never leaving her, saying nothing yet, making the air feel heavier just by being there. Before Sarah could react, a hoarse voice sounded behind her and made her turn sharply. This girl has a warrior's eyes. She faced the most frightening man she had ever seen. Victor Crane, about 50, huge as a bear, his face crisscrossed with scars like a map of hell. One eye dragged downward by an old wound, making him look as if he had stepped out of a horror film. They called him the Butcher, Sophia had told her, and Sarah did not want to know why. "I have seen thousands of eyes." Victor continued, his voice like stones grinding together. "The eyes of cowards, of the greedy, of liars, but yours," he tilted his head and stared into Sarah's eyes, "are the eyes of someone who has seen hell and still stands. I respect that." Sarah did not know what to say, her heart racing as she stood among the city's most dangerous men, and felt strangely not entirely afraid. "Oh, come on, why are you old guys so serious?" A cheerful voice broke the heavy air, and a man about 38, with messy brown hair and a boyish grin, stepped up and clapped Sarah on the shoulder. "I am Tony Marchetti, weapons boss. Sounds scary, but I am actually the nicest one here. Do not believe those guys, they only know how to look stern." Victor glared at Tony with a look that could kill, but Tony just grinned. "Hey, kid, you know why boss let you come here? Because you did what his 100 bodyguards could not. You saved the little princess. He owes you a life, and trust me, he will not forget that." Tony winked at Sarah. "And you are pretty too. I am sure boss noticed." Sarah could not help it. A small laugh slipped from her lips before she could stop it, and for the first time in many years, Sarah Reyes truly laughed. From the corner, Vincent Nero watched it all, and when his gray eyes rested on Sarah's smile, something in his chest that he had believed dead for 16 years began to stir. 20 miles to the south, inside an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district of Brighton Park, a man was in the grip of a violent rage. Alexei Volkov, 42 years old, the boss of the largest Russian mafia organization in Chicago, stood in the dark room with his face flushed with anger, his body built like a Siberian bear, his blonde hair cut short, his blue eyes cold as the winter ice of Moscow, and a long scar across his throat like a reminder of the near death he had escaped 10 years before. "Failure," Alexei roared, his voice echoing through the empty warehouse. "You told me failure was impossible. 4 gunmen, automatic weapons. The target, a 16-year-old girl sitting in a cheap diner, and you failed." 3 men knelt before him with their heads bowed, too afraid to look up, the ones who had escaped the chaos at Rosie's diner, and now faced the consequences. "Sir," one of them said in a trembling voice, "there was a woman. She jumped in front of the Nero girl before we could fire. We did not expect anyone to do that." "A woman," Alexei repeated, his voice cold as ice. "A woman ruined a plan I prepared for 2 months." He walked to a desk where an open file lay. Inside were surveillance photos of Sarah Reyes walking down the street, working at Rosie's, entering her new apartment in Lincoln Park. Sarah Reyes, Alexei read the name aloud as if tasting each syllable. 27 years old, orphaned, dirt poor, working 3 jobs to support her grandmother and sister. No one important, nothing special. And yet this girl took 3 bullets for Sophia Nero. He threw the file onto the desk and turned to a man standing in the shadows. And now Vincent Nero is protecting her like a treasure. A new apartment, a private nurse for the grandmother. All debts paid, the girl has become Nero's. The man stepped forward from the darkness. Nikolai, 30 years old, tall and thin like a blade, black hair cut close to the scalp, eyes so dark they held no light at all. Volkov's finest assassin, who had killed more than 50 targets without leaving a trace. "What do you want me to do, sir?" Nikolai asked, his voice flat and without emotion. Alexei smiled, the smile of a madman, the smile of a devil. "Kill the girl," he said, each word falling cold as snow. "But do not kill her quickly. Make Nero suffer. Let him know that anyone he cares about will die. Starting with this girl, then his daughter, then himself." Nikolai nodded without hesitation. "I understand." He turned and vanished into the shadows, as if he had never existed. And 20 miles away in the warm apartment in Lincoln Park, Sarah Reyes sat by the window looking out at Lake Michigan, glittering with nightlights. Unaware that death was moving toward her step by step, unaware that she had become a pawn in a game between two empires, unaware that her courage, the very thing that had saved Sofia Nero, was now the thing drawing her into mortal danger. 3 days after the meeting at the Nero estate, Sarah left the mansion after a long afternoon of talking with Sofia. The 16-year-old girl had taught Sarah how to play chess, even though Sarah lost 12 games in a row, and Sofia laughed until tears ran down her face. It had been a good day. A day when Sarah almost forgot she was living in a world of killers and shadows. The taxi dropped her off in front of the Lincoln Park building at 9 in the evening. The sky was dark, the streetlights flickered weakly, and the underground parking garage felt as empty as a graveyard. Sarah pushed through the glass door and her footsteps echoed on the cold concrete. She did not like parking garages because they reminded her of the dark alleys on the south side where darkness could swallow a person without anyone ever knowing. But this was Lincoln Park, she told herself. Safe, civilized. Nothing to fear. She was wrong. Sarah heard the footsteps before she saw them. Not one, not two, but 3 dark shapes separating from the shadows of the garage and moving toward her from 3 directions. Her heart began to race, and the survival instinct she had honed for 27 years on the south side started screaming in her head to run. She turned to bolt for the exit, but one of the figures blocked her path. His face hidden in shadow with only cold eyes glinting under the weak neon light. "Sarah Reyes." His voice hissed like a snake. "Mr. Volkov sends his regards." The name Volkov made Sarah's blood turn to ice. She had heard Vincent mention it, and Sofia speak of the enemy who wanted her dead, and now Volkov's men were standing in front of her. Sarah did not wait. She lunged to the left, where the space between 2 cars might give her a chance, but they were faster. A rough hand seized her hair and yanked her back. She screamed in pain but fought anyway. She clawed, kicked, bit, using everything she had. Her nails tore one man's face and her knee slammed into another's groin, making him double over. But the third punched her in the stomach so hard she could not breathe. She folded and fell onto the cold concrete. "This bitch is wild." One of them cursed with blood streaming down his face. "Tie her up. The boss wants her alive to torture." Sarah tried to rise, but a kick to her ribs sent her rolling. Tears spilling from the pain, they grabbed her arms and dragged her across the rough concrete, tearing her skin and leaving a trail of blood. "No," Sarah cried, her voice breaking with despair. "Let me go. Someone help me." But the garage was empty and no one heard, and no one came. She was about to be pulled into a black van parked in the corner and vanish forever, like so many others in Chicago's underworld, when the gunshots rang out. One shot, then another. Clean, precise, lethal. The man holding her hair collapsed with a neat hole in his forehead. The second fell with blood bursting from his chest. The third turned to run, but a dark figure appeared as if from nowhere. Marcus Williams, the ghost, stood there with a silenced gun in his hand and no emotion in his eyes. He fired once more, and the last man dropped like an empty sack. Silence followed with only Sarah's ragged breathing and the sound of blood dripping from the bodies. Marcus walked over, holstered his weapon, and pulled Sarah to her feet. She was shaking like a leaf, bruised and scraped and in pain but alive. "The boss ordered me to watch you from the day you left the hospital," Marcus said calmly, as if killing 3 men were routine. He knew Volkov would not stop. Men like him never stop until they are destroyed or get what they want. Sarah looked at Marcus, then at the 3 corpses, and then at her own trembling hands. She wanted to scream and cry and run far from this mad world, but she could only stand there shaking, while Marcus took out his phone and made a call. "Boss," he said briefly. "They came for her. She is safe, but we need to talk." And on the other end, Vincent Nero heard the words, and for the first time in 16 years, he felt something other than anger. He felt fear. 15 minutes after Marcus's call, a convoy of 3 black Escalades tore into the parking garage, as if hell itself were chasing them. Tires shrieking against the concrete, doors flying open before the vehicles had even stopped. and Vincent Nero stepped out like a storm making landfall. He was not wearing his usual suit. His white shirt was rolled up to the elbows, the collar open, his dark hair in disarray, as if he had run straight through a tempest. But what froze Sarah in place were his eyes. The gray eyes she had seen, cold as steel and emotionless as frozen water, were now burning. Red-rimmed, wild, and filled with pure fear, Vincent swept his gaze across the garage, over the 3 bodies sprawled on the ground, over Marcus standing guard, and then his eyes locked onto Sarah. She was sitting against a concrete pillar, her face swollen, her lips split and bleeding, her clothes torn, her hair matted with sweat and blood, looking like a wounded animal that had just escaped a predator's claws. And Vincent Nero, the most powerful mafia lord on the East Coast, the man the underworld feared, went still. "Sarah," his voice broke, no longer calm or threatening, but raw with pain as if his chest had been torn open. He crossed the distance in a few long strides and dropped to his knees on the cold concrete, as if his $1,000 suits and pride no longer existed. His hand rose to her face, gentle to the point she barely felt it, as if he were afraid she would shatter beneath fingers hardened by years of holding guns. "I will kill them one by one," Vincent whispered, his voice the growl of a wounded beast. "Every one of them. They dared to touch you. They dared to hurt you. I will make Volkov pay. I will tear him apart piece by piece. I will." He did not finish because Sarah, despite the pain, lifted her hand and placed it over his. "I am all right," she said, her voice hoarse from screaming and crying. "I am alive. Marcus came in time. I am all right." And then something Sarah never expected happened. Vincent Nero, the man who never showed emotion, who had frozen his heart for 16 years since his wife died, pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as if afraid she would vanish if he let go. Pressing his face into her hair and breathing hard like someone who had run a marathon, Sarah felt his heart pounding wildly in his chest, felt his body trembling slightly despite his effort to control it, and she understood with suffocating clarity that Vincent Nero was afraid. Not of Volkov, not of war, but of losing her. "Never do that to me again," he whispered by her ear, his voice strangely unsteady. Never. Sarah did not know what to say. She lay there in his arms, for the first time in 27 years being held with such desperate urgency, and felt something in her chest begin to melt. A soft cough sounded. Marcus stood nearby, his face still expressionless, but with something like curiosity in his eyes. "Boss," he said, "we need to move, and we need an emergency meeting." Vincent nodded, slowly released Sarah, but kept hold of her hand as if afraid she would disappear when he let go. He stood and pulled her up with him, then took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Take her back to the estate," Vincent ordered, his voice back to its usual coldness, though his hand did not release hers. "Call everyone. Meeting now." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in the Nero estate conference room, bandaged and changed into clean clothes, watching the most powerful men in Chicago's underworld decide her fate. Marcus, Dante, Victor, Tony, and Vincent at the head of the table, with eyes cold as ice. "From this moment on," Vincent said, his voice allowing no argument, "Sarah Reyes and her family, her grandmother and sister, are officially under the protection of the Nero Empire. Anyone who touches them touches me. Anyone who touches them declares war on this entire empire. Do you understand?" The 4 men nodded in unison, none daring to ask why the boss cared so much about an ordinary girl. But in their eyes, Sarah saw understanding. They had seen the way Vincent held her in the garage. They had seen the fear in his eyes. And they knew Sarah Reyes was no longer an outsider. She had become Vincent Nero's weakness. And in this world, a weakness could be the most dangerous thing of all. The next day, a convoy of 5 vehicles carried all their belongings from the Lincoln Park apartment to the Nero estate. Sarah stood before the massive iron gate, watching Abuela Rosa being wheeled in on a brand new chair with a private nurse beside her, watching Lily step out with eyes wide as saucers at a garden as large as their entire old neighborhood, and she felt as if she were dreaming. A strange dream she could not tell was a blessing or a nightmare. Sophia ran out to greet them, her black hair flying in the wind, her bright smile as if Christmas had come early. And when the 16-year-old saw Lily, something miraculous happened. Instead of speaking, Sophia lifted her hands and began to sign. "I am Sophia. I am very happy to meet you." Lily froze, her brown eyes wide with shock. She looked at Sarah as if asking whether this was real, and Sarah was just as astonished. Sophia laughed and kept signing. "I have been learning sign language for 3 days. I'm not very good yet, but I wanted to be able to talk to you." Tears rolled down Lily's cheeks as the 17-year-old rushed forward and hugged Sophia, and the two girls stood in the courtyard holding each other as if they had been sisters in another life. Sarah watched with her heart tightening with gratitude and emotion. For 17 years, Lily had never had a real friend, and now the daughter of Chicago's most frightening mafia lord had learned sign language just to talk to her. The world was strange, but the peace did not last. That very evening, Sarah and Vincent had their first confrontation in the estate's vast kitchen. She was making tea for her grandmother when Vincent came in and set a folder of papers on the counter. "An employment contract," he said in a voice that allowed no argument. "You will be the house manager of the estate. Salary $15,000 a month." Sarah looked at the papers, then at Vincent, and let out a short laugh. A laugh no one in the Nero Empire would dare make in front of the boss. "House manager," she repeated with bitter amusement. "Are you trying to turn me into your employee, so you can control me more easily?" Vincent's gray eyes darkened. "I am trying to give you a job so you do not feel indebted. You hate feeling like charity, do you not? Then work and earn your own money." Sarah set the teapot down and turned to face him, her brown eyes burning. "You think you understand me. You think because you have money and power, you can arrange my life however you want. I do not need a job from you. I can find my own. You cannot go outside." Vincent snapped. "Volkov is hunting you. The moment you leave the gate, you die. Then that is your problem, not mine." Sarah shot back. "I did not ask you to protect me. I did not ask you to drag me into this mad world. You can buy the world, Vincent Nero, but you cannot buy me. I am not an object. I am not a puppet. And I am certainly not your house manager." Silence fell. The vast kitchen suddenly felt small as they stood facing each other, neither willing to step back. Vincent looked at Sarah, the small woman with tangled brown hair and eyes full of fire, who dared stand before him and say what no one else ever dared. And something stirred in his chest. Not anger, not irritation, but attraction, respect, and something far more dangerous he did not yet dare name. Vincent Nero had met thousands of people, those who feared him, flattered him, wanted to kill him, but no one had ever looked him in the eye and said no. No one had ever treated him like a man instead of a monster. Until Sarah Reyes appeared. "All right," Vincent finally said, his voice strangely gentler. "No contract. Live here as a guest. But do not leave the estate without an escort. That is my only request." He turned to go, but stopped at the door. "And Sarah," he said without turning back, "you are the first person to argue with me like that in 16 years. I do not know whether to be angry or impressed." He disappeared through the door, leaving Sarah with her heart pounding and a single thought echoing in her mind. She was playing with fire and she knew it, but she could not stop. 2 a.m, Sarah lay on the softest bed she had ever slept in a room larger than her old South Side apartment, and yet she could not sleep, because every time she closed her eyes she saw the dark figures in the parking garage again, felt the rough hand in her hair again, heard the gunshots again and smelled the metallic tang of blood, the nightmare refusing to release her even while she was awake. So she rose, slipped on a thin sweater, and moved quietly out of her room. The mansion hushed in the night, the old paintings on the walls seeming to watch her pass. She went toward the kitchen thinking a warm glass of milk might help, but when she pushed the door open she saw she was not the only one awake. Vincent Nero sat at the marble island, leaning back in his chair with a bottle of whiskey already half empty before him and a glass of amber liquid catching the moonlight. No lights were on. Only the pale silver glow from the window tracing the scars on his face. Sarah hesitated to turn away, but he spoke first. "You cannot sleep either." It was not a question. Sarah paused, then went in and sat across from him, the distance between them no more than the width of the island, and yet it felt like an ocean. "Nightmares," she admitted without knowing why she was honest. "I keep seeing the garage." Vincent nodded and poured more into his glass. "I understand. I have nights like that too." The silence stretched. Sarah watched him, the long scar silvered by moonlight, the gray eyes fixed on the drink as if searching for something there, and she asked what she had long wanted to ask. "Where did you get that scar?" He did not answer at once. He lifted his hand and traced the line from temple to jaw as if touching an old memory. "The night my father was assassinated," he said, his voice like distant thunder. "I was 20. They killed him in front of me, and then tried to kill me. I survived and kept the scar as a reminder." Sarah said nothing and listened. "But that is not the scar that hurts the most." Vincent continued, and for the first time his voice trembled slightly. "The one that hurts is when Isabella died. My wife, Sophia's mother. She died giving birth. The doctor said they could save only one, the mother or the child. Isabella chose the child. She looked at me, smiled, and said, 'Love our daughter for both of us.' Then she closed her eyes. 16 years ago, and it still feels like yesterday. Sarah felt her heart tighten as she saw not a feared king but a lonely father carrying grief that never faded. After that, I swore I would never love again, Vincent said, his gray eyes staring into nothing, because to love is to risk losing, and I cannot bear that again. It is better to freeze the heart, better to feel nothing. Sarah understood more than he knew. My parents died in a fire when I was 12, she said, the words breaking through a dam 15 years old. An electrical fault in the slum house. I woke to the smell of smoke. My mother pushed me out the window and told me to jump. I jumped, and when I looked back, the house was a sea of flames. I watched them die and could do nothing. Vincent looked at her and something in his eyes softened. After that, I raised myself, my grandmother, Lily. Sarah went on. I did whatever it took to survive, and then I met a man. I thought he loved me. I trusted him. I gave him all my savings to open a shop, and he disappeared with the money and with the last of my faith in people. She smiled bitterly. After that, I also swore never to trust again, never to love again, because people only hurt me. Silence fell, two wounded souls in the dark, finding for the first time someone who truly understood. Vincent rose and came around the island to stand before her, moonlight drawing light and shadow across his face. He lifted his hand and touched her cheek, his rough fingers gentle as if touching something more precious than any treasure he owned. Do you know what frightens me most? Sarah, he whispered, his voice low like a cello in the night. Not Volkov, not enemies. But you make me want to believe again. After 16 years, you make me want to feel again. And that, his gray eyes meeting her brown ones, terrifies me more than anything. Sarah did not speak. She stood there under the moon with the hand of the most feared man on the East Coast on her cheek, and for the first time in 15 years she did not want to run. 1 week after the night in the kitchen, when everything seemed to be slowly settling, hell fell. Sarah was sitting in the living room with Lily and Sophia, the three girls learning sign language together, their laughter echoing through the warm room, when Vincent's phone rang, then a shout, then the sound of running feet, and then the entire estate seemed to wake in a storm. Sarah rushed into the hallway and saw Vincent standing in the middle of his office with the phone still pressed to his ear, his face white as a corpse. Marcus, Dante, Victor, Tony all running toward him with horror on their faces. What? Vincent said, his voice so cold the air itself seemed to freeze. Say it again. Say it again. Nocturne Club, Marcus said, his voice steady but his hand was trembling. A bomb. It went off 10 minutes ago. The entire first floor destroyed. 12 dead. 23 injured. 7 of them ours. Silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then Vincent exploded. Volkov. He roared like thunder tearing the sky. I will kill him. I will tear him apart piece by piece. Call everyone. Mobilize everything. We attack tonight. The room turned into a broken hive. Phones ringing. People rushing in and out. Orders shouted. Weapons being loaded. Sarah stood in the corner, pulling Lily and Sophia behind her, her heart racing as she watched Vincent Nero's world ignite in fury. But the storm did not stop there. 2 hours later, while Vincent was in an emergency meeting, and preparations for the counterattack were underway, his phone rang again. This time a video call from an unknown number, and when Vincent answered, the room went dead silent. On the screen, Sophia sat on a wooden chair, her hands bound behind her back, her mouth sealed with black tape, her gray eyes wide with terror, tears streaming down her cheeks, and behind her, Alexei Volkov stood, smiling the smile of a devil. Nero, Volkov said with pleasure, surprised, you think you can protect your daughter? You think your walls and your guards can stop me? You are wrong. I have my people everywhere, even inside your empire. A traitor. Someone had sold information. Someone had told Volkov which school Sophia attended, her schedule, when she was without protection, and Volkov had acted. Here is my demand. Volkov went on, his hand on Sophia's shoulder making her tremble. $100 million, and you, Vincent Nero, will kneel before me and surrender. You have 24 hours. If not, your daughter will die, and I will send you her body piece by piece, starting with her fingers. The call ended. The screen went dark, and Vincent Nero, the most powerful mafia lord on the East Coast, the man the underworld feared, collapsed. He did not scream. He did not break anything. He simply stood there, and then slowly sank to his knees, his head falling into his hands, his shoulders shaking. No one moved. No one spoke. The room drowned in deadly silence as they watched their boss shatter. Sophia, Vincent whispered, his voice breaking like cracked glass. My daughter. She is everything I have. I cannot lose her. I cannot. Sarah watched and felt her heart being crushed. She saw the man who had opened himself to her the night before, now kneeling like a child robbed of what mattered most, and she could not endure it. She crossed the room, past Marcus frozen in place, past Dante clenching his jaw, past Victor's fists, digging into his palms, and knelt before Vincent. "Look at me," she said softly but firmly. "Vincent, look at me." He lifted his head, gray eyes red-rimmed with despair and pain, and Sarah did what she had not done for anyone in 15 years. She held him. She held Vincent Nero in a room full of the most dangerous men in Chicago as if he were a child who needed shelter. And she whispered with promise in her voice, "We will save Sophia. I promise. I will do whatever it takes to bring her back. Do you hear me? We will save her." Vincent said nothing. He only held her tighter, as if she were the only thing keeping him from drowning. And in that moment, everyone in the room knew that Sarah Reyes was no longer an outsider. She had become part of this empire, part of this war, and perhaps part of Vincent Nero's heart. 6 hours after Volkov's video, Vincent's office had become a war command center. Maps spread across the table, phones ringing without pause. Marcus and the senior members moving in and out with fresh intelligence. They had located Sophia in an abandoned warehouse in the Brighton Park Industrial District where Volkov had established his base. But the problem was that the warehouse was heavily guarded with more than 50 gunmen, surveillance cameras everywhere, and Volkov had made it clear he would kill Sophia immediately if he sensed any sign of an attack. "We cannot breach it without being seen," Marcus said heavily. "No matter how many men or how many weapons we bring, they will see us coming and then Sophia will die." Vincent stood by the window with his back to them, his shoulders drawn tight like a wire about to snap. He said nothing, but Sarah could see his fists clenched until the knuckles were white. And in that moment of desperation, Sarah made the most reckless decision of her life. "Use me," she said into the silence. The room turned to stare at her as if she had grown another head. Vincent spun around, his gray eyes dark. "Volkov wants me," Sarah went on, her voice strangely calm. "He ordered my death because I saved Sophia. He sees me as your weakness, so give him what he wants. I will appear somewhere public, so he knows where I am. When he sends men to take me, the guard around Sophia will be thinner, and you can break in?" "No," Vincent thundered. "Absolutely not. This is the only way. There is no way that requires you to die." Vincent stepped toward her, every footstep heavy. "You think I will let you walk into the lion's den alone? You think I will trade your life for my daughter's? I am not important," Sarah shot back, standing straight, though her heart was racing. "Sophia is important. She is 16. She has her whole life ahead of her. I am just a girl nobody needs." "Do not say that," Vincent snapped, his eyes burning. "You are not nobody. You are the one who saved my daughter. You are the one who made me believe again. You are the one I cannot lose." Sarah looked at him and felt her chest tighten. Then she asked the truth she had been holding back. "Why do you care about me like this? I am just a poor girl from the South Side. I have nothing. I am nothing. Why? Because you are you?" Vincent said, his voice unsteady. "Because you are the only woman who dares argue with me. Because you are the only one who looks at me like a man and not a monster. Because you are the first person who has made me want to wake up every morning since Isabella died." Silence fell. The room seemed to stop breathing as Marcus, Dante, Victor, and Tony stood frozen, hearing their boss speak like this for the first time in 16 years. "I will not let you die," Vincent said, each word heavy as stone. "I would surrender to Volkov before I watch him kill you." And that was when Sarah broke. "You do not understand," she cried, tears spilling despite herself. "I am not doing this for you. I am doing it for Sophia, because she is the sister I never had, because she learned sign language just to speak to Lily, because she was the first person who ever called me sister and meant it, and because," her voice cracked, "I cannot bear to see you suffer. I cannot watch you kneel and cry like you did earlier. I cannot watch you lose the last person you love, even if it costs me my life. I am willing, because you and Sophia deserve happiness, and I have been sacrificing my whole life anyway." Sarah stood there shaking with tears on her face, expecting Vincent to keep arguing, but he did not. Vincent stepped in front of her, took her face in his hands, and kissed her, not gently, not romantically, but fiercely and desperately, as if pouring 16 years of loneliness into her mouth, as if afraid she would vanish if he let go. Sarah froze for a heartbeat, then closed her eyes and kissed him back as if it were the last time, as if tomorrow she might die, as if all their pain and scars were melting into this single moment. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Vincent rested his forehead against hers, his gray eyes locked on her brown ones. "If you die," he whispered, "I will burn this world to the ground." Sarah smiled through her tears. "Then do not let me die." And from the corner, Marcus cleared his throat softly. "We still need a plan, boss. And it seems hers is the only one we have." 18 hours after the kiss in the office, the plan was set in motion. Sarah stood alone in an abandoned parking lot in the industrial south of Chicago under flickering streetlights and a night wind that cut to the bone. She wore a bulletproof vest beneath her coat, a small gun hidden in her boot, and a tracking device sewn into her collar. Vincent had held her before she got into the car, crushing her to his chest as if afraid to let go, whispering that if anything happened, he would come for her immediately. And now she stood waiting, heart pounding, eyes scanning the dark. They arrived exactly as expected. 3 black SUVs screeched into the lot, and dozens of gunmen spilled out. Nikolai, with his dead eyes, leading them toward her with a cold smile. "Volkov will be very pleased to see you," he said without emotion. "He has special plans for you." Sarah did not resist as they bound her hands. That was part of the plan? To let them take her to Volkov so Vincent would have time. 5 miles away in the warehouse where Sophia was held, the assault began. Marcus lay on the roof of a ruined building 300 meters away, eye pressed to the scope, finger on the trigger. When 2 SUVs left the warehouse to go after Sarah, the guard thinned, just as predicted. "Begin." Vincent's voice came through the earpiece. Marcus's first shot dropped the lookout in the tower, then the second, then the third, clean, precise, lethal as his name, the Ghost. At the same time, Victor led the rear assault, fighting like a demon from hell with a knife in one hand and a gun in the other. Blood spraying as men fell beneath him, screams tearing the night. This was the Butcher doing what he did best. Dante and Tony struck from the sides, pinning the enemy between them. Bullets rained, explosions thundered, the air filled with gunpowder and blood. The warehouse became hell on earth, and through the storm, Vincent charged to find his daughter. He kicked in the cell door and saw Sophia curled in the corner. Hands still bound, eyes wet with tears but alive. "Alive, Father," Sophia sobbed as Vincent crushed her to him. "You are safe now," Vincent whispered, holding her as if she might vanish. "I am here. No one will ever hurt you again." But before the relief could settle, Marcus's voice came urgent in the earpiece. "Boss, Sarah, we have a problem." Vincent's heart stopped. At the same moment across the city, Sarah faced Volkov in the dark room of an abandoned factory. The plan had failed. Volkov was not as foolish as they thought. He knew it was a trap. He knew Sarah was bait, and he chose to kill her now instead of waiting. "So Nero thought he could play games with me." Volkov laughed, his gun aimed straight at Sarah. "He used you as a distraction. Pity I saw it from the start." Sarah looked at the black muzzle and knew she was about to die, but she was not afraid. Sophia was safe. Vincent had saved his daughter. She had done what she promised. Volkov pulled the trigger. The bullet tore into Sarah's abdomen beneath the vest where there was no protection. She fell as blood poured out and pain ripped through her. But as she went down, her hand drew the gun from her boot and she fired once, hitting Volkov in the shoulder. He screamed and fell back, his weapon clattering away. Sarah lay in her own blood, struggling to keep her eyes open. Struggling to breathe, she heard engines roar outside, gunfire, shouting. Then the door was kicked open and Vincent appeared. His eyes took in the room. Sarah in blood, Volkov trying to rise, and something in Vincent Nero shattered completely. He did not use his gun. He lunged, seized Volkov by the collar and began to strike. Again and again, each blow carrying 16 years of loneliness. The terror of losing Sophia, the agony of seeing Sarah bleeding. "You dared touch her," Vincent roared with every punch. "You dared hurt her. You dared." Volkov's face broke under the blows, bones cracking, blood spraying. But Vincent did not stop until Marcus dragged him away. "Boss, Sarah needs a hospital. Now." Vincent froze, looked at his bloodied hands, then at Sarah lying still, breath faint, life hanging by a thread. And the most powerful mafia lord on the East Coast wept. 7 days that felt like 7 centuries. Vincent Nero sat beside Sarah's hospital bed without eating, without sleeping, without leaving even for a second. The doctors had told him in grave voices that the bullet had passed through her liver, causing massive blood loss, and that they were not sure she would survive. But Vincent refused to accept that. He sat there holding Sarah's cold hand, and for the first time in his 36 years he prayed. In the corner, Abuela Rosa knelt on a chair, fingers moving over her rosary, as her lips whispered prayers in Spanish. She had prayed without stopping for 7 days, begging the Virgin Mary to save the granddaughter she loved more than her own life. Lily sat beside her with silent tears running down her face. her hands moving in sign language as if she were speaking to God in her own way. Sophia knelt on the other side of the bed opposite Vincent, her eyes swollen from crying as she held Sarah's other hand. The 16-year-old girl had sworn to her father that if Sarah woke up, she would never argue again, never be reckless again. She would do anything he asked, and then on the 8th day, when morning sunlight slipped through the curtains, Sarah opened her eyes. She blinked a few times, adjusting to the light, and looked to the side. Vincent was there with a week's worth of stubble, red-rimmed eyes from lack of sleep and tears, rumpled clothes, looking like a man who had walked through hell and returned. When he saw her eyes open, he jumped up, dropped to his knees by the bed, and gripped her hand so tightly it almost hurt. "You dared to leave me," he whispered, shaking. "You dared to almost die and leave me alone. Do you know how afraid I was? Do you know I thought I would lose you forever?" Sarah looked at him at the shattered face of the most powerful mafia lord on the East Coast, and she smiled. A weak but warm smile. "I survived the South Side for 27 years, she said hoarsely. "Did you really think I would die that easily? It takes more than a bullet to bring me down, Vincent Nero." Vincent laughed for the first time in 7 days, a laugh mixed with tears. He bent down and kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then her lips, gently as if afraid she would break. 1 year later, Sarah stood on the balcony of the Nero estate, looking out over the garden, filled with white roses and guests in elegant evening wear. Today was her wedding day. She wore a simple but elegant white dress, her brown hair swept up, revealing her long neck and the diamond earrings Vincent had given her. 2 arms wrapped around her waist from behind. The familiar scent, the warmth of the man she loved. "Do you regret it?" Vincent whispered in her ear. "Regret stepping into this mad world? Regret being with a man like me?" Sarah turned in his arms and lifted her hand to touch the scar on his face. The scar she had come to love as she loved him. "I survived hell to reach heaven," she said, looking straight into his gray eyes. "No, I do not regret it. Not for a single second." Below in the garden, Sophia was leading Lily between the rows of chairs, the 2 girls laughing in sign language. Abuela Rosa sat in the front row, her condition finally stabilized, and her pain kept at bay after a year of treatment with the best doctors. Tears of happiness on her wrinkled cheeks. Marcus stood guard at the corner of the garden, but today he was smiling, knowing the empire was finally secure after he had personally dealt with the traitor, a junior guard, who had been bribed by Volkov, who had sold Sophia's schedule. Victor, the terrifying butcher, awkwardly held a bouquet a child had just given him. Tony was joking, making the tables laugh. Dante was calculating the wedding costs and shaking his head because Boss had spent far too much. This was Sarah's family now, the family she had never dared to dream of. Vincent took her hand and led her down into the garden where everyone was waiting. And when they spoke their vows, when Vincent slid the ring onto her finger, when he kissed her under the golden sunset, Sarah knew her life had changed forever. She was no longer Sarah Reyes, the invisible girl from the South Side with 3 jobs and $100,000 in debt. She was Sarah Nero, queen of the empire, the mother Sophia never had, the love Vincent had waited 16 years for. The blood debt had been paid, the circle was closed, and the girl who had once been invisible would never be forgotten, because in Vincent Nero's world, love was the most dangerous debt of all, and he was ready to pay it with his entire life. The story of Sarah and Vincent has ended, but the lesson remains. Life is never easy for any of us. There are times when we feel invisible, unimportant, when the world feels too cruel to keep going. But remember that in the darkest moments, light will find its way. Sarah spent her life surviving, carrying burdens, sacrificing without expecting anything in return, and it was her courage, her kindness, and her unconditional selflessness that changed not only her life but the lives of those around her. Sometimes angels come to us in the strangest forms, just as Abuela Rosa said, and sometimes we ourselves are someone else's angel without knowing it. If this story touched your heart, please like and share this video with those you love. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss our daily stories. We would love to hear what this story made you feel. Have you ever felt invisible in your life? Do you believe love can change a person's fate? Leave a comment below and share your story and connect with us and with others. Because sometimes just knowing that someone out there understands you makes life easier to breathe. Thank you for spending your time with us. We wish you good health, a joyful and peaceful life every day. Always believe that wherever you are, whatever you are going through, you deserve love and happiness. Goodbye and see you again in the next video.